What are you doing? James's roar shattered the quiet Bel Air afternoon, boots pounding across the wet flagstone as he charged toward the terrace. The garden hose was already screaming. Full blast, ice-cold Pacific water slamming into Margaret's chest like a fire hose on riot control. Her silk robe darkened instantly, clinging, heavy. Her silver hair whipped back, mouth open in shock. The wheelchair rocked hard on its wheels. James's face twisted in pure panic. "Lydia, turn it off! You're hurting her! Stop!" But Lydia didn't even blink. She planted her feet wider, both hands locked white-knuckled on the nozzle, directing the relentless stream straight at Margaret's torso, then lower. Legs, thighs, feet, water exploding off skin and metal in freezing arcs. "I'll wash your mom and she will walk!" Lydia's voice sliced through the roar, calm, unyielding, almost reverent, like she'd already seen the ending no one else could imagine. James skidded to a halt, breath heaving, eyes locked on those hands that hadn't gripped anything with real force in 14 years. Margaret's shoulders bunched under the assault. Her torso jerked forward, once, twice, fighting the stream. She sucked in a ragged, shivering breath and shouted over the pounding water, I can feel it!" James staggered forward one step, then froze again, hands hovering uselessly, face drained of color. Margaret's head snapped forward through the curtain of spray, eyes wide, wild, burning with something raw and unfamiliar. Tears, or maybe just water, streamed down her cheeks. "Alex, it's like fire. In my legs." James's voice cracked, barely audible over the hose. "Mom, what's happening?" Lydia kept the nozzle locked, steady, merciless. "She's not drowning," she said quietly, eyes never leaving Margaret. "She's waking up." The hose kept roaring. The terrace kept flooding. And in the middle of the freezing chaos, something no doctor had predicted was stirring inside the woman who'd been still for 14 years. James reached forward, shaking, helpless, toward his mother's trembling hand. The question burned in his eyes. Was this madness or the beginning of something impossible? Before we continue, I want to speak to you for a moment. If stories like this remind you that kindness still exists, if they make you feel something real in a world that's getting louder and colder, then I'd love to have you here with us. This channel isn't just videos. It's a tiny corner of the internet where good people come together, where we believe in second chances, in hope, and in humanity. And right now, you're early. You're part of the very first people building this family with me. So if you want to grow with us, if you want more stories that touch your heart, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, it supports the channel more than you know, and it tells me that there are still people out there who believe in kindness just as much as I do. If you have subscribed to this channel, I can officially say, welcome to the family. James Wright had spent the last 14 years chasing miracles money could buy. At 50, he was one of LA's sharpest real estate sharks, flipping hillside estates into 9-figure deals, closing with tech billionaires and foreign investors who wanted their slice of the Hollywood Hills. But no deal ever closed the gap in his own home. His mother Margaret's spinal cord compression from that brutal fall down the Brentwood staircase in 2012 had left her paralyzed from the chest down. Doctors called it complete. No regeneration, no hope. James refused to accept it. He flew in the best. Spinal surgeons from Cedars-Sinai who promised cutting-edge decompression, neurologists from UCSF running experimental stem cell infusions, even overseas cryotherapy trials in Switzerland, where they chilled the body to slow secondary damage. Tens of millions vanished into MRIs, rehab centers, custom motorized wheelchairs with voice controls, and a private wing in his Bel Air mega mansion redesigned for zero-threshold access. Every specialist echoed the same verdict: permanent. James kept paying anyway, because stopping felt like surrender. Margaret, 75 and graceful even in stillness, never complained. She watched sunsets from her terrace, listened to old jazz records, and smiled when he brought home stories from closing deals. But lately she'd grown quieter, her eyes drifting to the infinity pool that seemed to pour into the city lights below. 2 weeks ago, Lydia Brooks started as live-in housekeeper, quiet, efficient, mid-30s, Black woman with short curls and a steady gaze. References impeccable. Background check clean. She handled the household without fuss. Meals prepped, linens crisp, terrace swept. Margaret liked her immediately. She listens, Margaret told James one evening. Really listens. This afternoon, James had wrapped an early escrow in Century City. He drove back up the winding Bel Air roads in his black Range Rover, mind already on the next flip. He pulled through the gates, parked in the motor court, and headed straight for the terrace to check on Mom before calls. He froze at the French doors. Lydia stood on the flagstone patio, garden hose in both hands, nozzle wide open. Ice-cold water, straight from the Pacific Fed line, blasted Margaret in her wheelchair. Margaret's silk robe was soaked dark, silver hair plastered to her face, body shuddering under the torrent. The chair rocked slightly with each pulse of pressure. James's blood turned to ice. "What are you doing?" His roar shattered the quiet Bel Air afternoon, boots pounding across the wet flagstone as he charged toward the terrace. The hose screamed full blast, water slamming into Margaret's chest like a riot control jet. Her robe clung heavy, silver hair whipped back, mouth open in shock. The wheelchair rocked hard on its wheels. James's face twisted in pure panic. "Lydia, turn it off! You're hurting her! Stop!" But Lydia didn't even blink. She planted her feet wider, hands locked white-knuckled on the nozzle, directing the relentless stream straight at Margaret's torso, then lower, legs, thighs, feet, water exploding off skin and metal in freezing arcs. "I'll wash your mom and she will walk." Lydia's voice sliced through the roar, calm, unyielding, almost reverent, like she'd already seen the ending no one else could imagine. James skidded to a halt, breath heaving. "Are you insane? 14 years. 14 years of the best doctors in the country, and you think a garden hose fixes it?" Margaret's mouth opened wider, gasping against the cold. Her hands flew up instinctively, palms flat against the pounding water, then curled into fists. Fingers dug into the armrests, knuckles blanched white. James staggered forward. "Mom, hold on, I'm coming." Lydia kept the stream locked. All those doctors mapped the damage. They never forced the body to fight back, never shocked it awake. Margaret's shoulders bunched under the assault. She sucked in a ragged breath and shouted over the pounding, I can feel it." James's knees nearly gave. He dropped to one knee in the spreading puddle, staring up in frozen horror. Margaret's head snapped forward through the spray, eyes wide, burning. "Alex, it's like fire. In my legs." Lydia's tone stayed even. "My uncle was a Navy SEAL, blown up in training, paralyzed below the waist. Docs said permanent. He used extreme cold exposure drills to wake his nerves. Military-grade resilience. It worked. He walks today." James's head snapped toward her. "You're basing this on your uncle?" Margaret's right leg twitched, sharp, involuntary, once, twice. Foot jerked against the footrest. Her voice cracked through the spray, raw. "Alex, that fall wasn't just an accident. We argued that night about selling the Brentwood house. I was rushing down the stairs angry, distracted. I've felt these flickers for years, but I hid them. Didn't want to drag you through more hope and heartbreak." James's face crumpled. Guilt slammed him harder than the water ever could. The hose kept roaring. The terrace kept flooding. And in the freezing chaos, something long buried was stirring. The hose kept roaring, but Lydia finally dialed the pressure down. Just a steady, controlled stream now, no longer a riot jet. Water still poured over Margaret's legs, soaking through slacks, pooling around the wheelchair tires in dark, rippling circles. The terrace smelled of wet stone and chlorine from the infinity pool nearby. Far below, the 405 hummed like distant thunder, and the LA sky had started bleeding orange as the sun dipped behind the hills. James stayed on one knee in the puddle, soaked from the knees down, cashmere ruined, staring at his mother like she might vanish if he blinked. Margaret's breathing came in short, shivering bursts. Her hands still gripped the armrests, knuckles pale but steady. She looked down at James, eyes glassy, not from pain, but from something deeper. "Alex," she whispered, voice rough from shouting over the water. It's real, I swear it's real. Lydia lowered the nozzle slightly, letting the stream hit Margaret's thighs in slow, deliberate sweeps. Focus, Mrs. Wright, not on what the doctor said you can't feel, on what's happening right this second. Any heat? Tingling? Anything moving? Margaret closed her eyes, head tilting back against the headrest. There's pressure, like pins waking up, and warmth, deep under the skin. It's been there before. Little sparks on cold mornings. I thought it was nothing. Or wishful thinking. James's throat worked. You never told me. Margaret opened her eyes, meeting his. I couldn't bear to see that look on your face again. The hope that crashes. You've spent so much already. I didn't want to be the reason you lost more. Lydia kept the water moving, methodical, almost clinical. That's the trap, Mr. Wright. All those years of gentle care, warm baths, soft massages, heated pads. Your body learns to tune out. No signal, no response. Everything goes quiet, but cold, sharp, it forces attention. It screams, pay attention, fight. James pushed himself to his feet, water dripping from his sweater. His voice came out hoarse. This isn't science. This is desperation. Lydia met his gaze without flinching. Desperation is what got my uncle walking again. He was paralyzed after a training explosion. Navy SEAL, same story your doctors told him. Complete injury, no hope. He did cold plunges, ice baths, shock exposure drills, military protocol. 2 years later, he's back on his feet. That's why I know what I'm doing. James's eyes narrowed. You're telling me you got this job to play Navy SEAL therapist on my mother? Lydia's expression softened, just a fraction. No, I got this job because your foundation paid for his rehab, anonymously. Covered the experimental facility in San Diego when the VA wouldn't. I tracked it down. I wanted to say thank you, by helping the woman who raised the man who made it possible. James blinked. The words landed like a quiet punch. You knew who I was when you applied? I knew who your mother was, Lydia said simply. And I knew she deserved someone who wouldn't stop looking for a way forward. Margaret's voice cut in, soft but firm. She's right, Alex. I've felt these flickers for longer than I admitted. I kept quiet because I was scared, of disappointing you, of making you chase another dead end. But right now, I don't want to be quiet anymore. James looked between them, his mother soaked and shivering but alive in a way he hadn't seen in years. Lydia steady as stone, hose still in hand. He swallowed hard. What do you need her to do? Lydia nodded once. Press on her thigh, not gentle, firm, like you're testing if the muscle remembers how to answer. James hesitated, then knelt again, closer this time. He placed his palm on Margaret's right thigh, just above the knee. Looked at her for permission. Margaret nodded. He pressed, hard, deliberate. Margaret gasped, sharp, sudden. Her whole body jerked. I felt that, she breathed. Clear, sharp, like electricity. James's hand froze. How? Lydia's voice was low. Because those nerves aren't dead. They've been asleep, and sleep can end. Margaret's eyes filled. Alex, there was a note. Years ago, one of the neurologists at Cedars mentioned latent plasticity, said the cord might still have pathways that could rewire with the right stimulus. You dismissed it, said we weren't putting me through more false hope. James's face crumpled. I remember. I told him to stop. I couldn't watch you hurt again. Margaret reached out, slow, trembling, and touched his cheek. You were protecting me, but protection can become a cage. The sun slipped lower, painting the terrace in deep gold and long shadows. Lydia turned the hose back on, gentler now, a steady rinse over Margaret's legs. Let's see how long she can hold a lift, Lydia said. Not standing yet, just up, off the seat. 3 seconds, then 5. Build slow. Margaret gripped the armrest tighter. James stood beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell. Ready, Mom? Margaret looked up at the sky, then at her son. Ready. Lydia counted softly. 1, 2, 3. Margaret pushed. Her torso rose. 2 inches. 3, 4. Held, shaking, breathing hard, then dropped back with a gasp. But she laughed. Small, breathless, real. James's eyes burned. He hadn't heard that laugh in 14 years. The sunset kept bleeding across the hills, and for the first time in forever, the impossible didn't feel quite so far away. The sun had dropped low enough that the terrace glowed in deep amber and rose-gold streaks. Shadows stretched long across the flagstone, and the infinity pool caught fire with reflected light. The hose lay coiled on the ground now, dripping softly, its work done for the moment. Margaret sat straighter in the wheelchair, still soaked, still shivering, but her eyes were bright, focused, like someone who'd just remembered she had a pulse. Lydia knelt in front of her, hands resting lightly on Margaret's knees, not pressing, just steadying. "We're not rushing," she said, "but we're not stopping either. The cold shocked the system awake. Now we build strength, slow, deliberate. Every second you hold counts." James stood a few feet away, arms crossed tight over his chest like he was holding himself together. His sweater clung damp and heavy. He hadn't bothered to change. He watched every movement, every breath, like a man afraid the spell would break if he looked away. Margaret nodded once, small, determined. "Let's do it again." Lydia counted softly. "Grip the arms. Push when I say. 1, 2, 3. Margaret braced, her arms locked, shoulders rose, torso lifted. 5 inches this time. Held. 6 seconds. 7. Her legs trembled beneath the soaked slacks, but they didn't collapse inward. Muscles that had been silent for 14 years flickered, twitched, answered. Margaret exhaled hard and dropped back with a soft grunt. Lydia smiled, small, proud. 7 seconds. That's progress. Feel how your core engaged. That's the nervous system talking back. The cold mimicked what neurostimulation research does. Jolts the pathways, forces rewiring. UCLA's been running quiet trials on temperature extremes for years. You're living proof it's not just theory. James's voice came out rough. "You're saying this could have happened sooner? If we'd pushed harder?" Lydia looked up at him. "I'm saying bodies adapt to what you give them. Warmth and gentleness kept her safe. But safe isn't the same as alive. The cold was the alarm clock." Margaret's breathing steadied. She looked at her son. Really looked. "Alex, there's something else coming back. Not just feeling. Memories." James stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Margaret's gaze drifted past the pool, toward the city lights beginning to sparkle below. "Every time the water hits, flashes come. Little things I buried, like 6 years ago, during one of those cold winter nights here in the house. I swear I felt my toes curl under the blanket. Just once. I told myself it was a cramp, ignored it. Then again, maybe 4 years back, during a rainstorm. My calf twitched when thunder shook the windows. I stayed quiet. Every time. Because if I said anything, if it turned out to be nothing, I'd see that hope die in your eyes again. And I couldn't do that to you." James's arms dropped to his sides. "You hid it. For me?" Margaret's voice cracked. "I was terrified of being the reason you hurt more. You'd already lost so much. Your father, then me to this chair. I thought silence was kinder, but silence became a wall, and fear built it higher." James sank onto the edge of a lounge chair, elbows on knees, face in hands. "I kept telling myself I was protecting you. No more tests, no more pain. But I was protecting myself too. From hoping, from failing you again." He looked up, eyes red, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I let comfort become the end of the story. I should have kept fighting. With you. For you." Margaret reached out. Her hand, steady now, found his. "You gave me a beautiful life up here. Views most people only dream of. But I want more than views now. I want to walk through them." Lydia stood, brushing wet curls from her forehead. "Then let's give her more." She stepped back a few feet. "Next hold, aim for 20 seconds. No half effort, full commitment. When your legs shake, That's the sign they're remembering. Lean into it. Margaret gripped the armrests again. I'm ready. James moved beside the chair, close enough to steady her shoulder if needed. Lydia counted. 1, 2, 3. Margaret pushed. Torso rose, higher this time, 8 inches. 10. Legs trembled violently. Held. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Her face contorted with effort, sweat mixing with leftover water on her brow. 25. 30. The shaking intensified. Muscles firing, nerves screaming, but she held. Lydia's voice was fierce, encouraging. That's it. Fight the shake. Own it. Your body's begging to remember. Let it. Margaret's breath came in sharp bursts. 40 seconds. Her arms locked, core engaged, legs quivering but supporting. Then, slowly, deliberately, she straightened her back fully. Upright, fully upright, no slouch, no lean. The wheelchair sat empty beneath her. James's hand flew to his mouth. Margaret opened her eyes, tears spilling, and looked straight at him. I'm standing, she whispered. Not quite standing, still braced on locked arms, feet flat on the footrests, but her body was vertical, weight shifted forward, spine straight for the first time in 14 years. The LA sunset framed her like a halo. James couldn't speak. He just stared, frozen, tears streaming, as his mother held the position. 45 seconds. 50. Lydia stepped forward quietly. That's enough for now. Lower slow. Control it. Margaret eased back down, controlled, trembling, but deliberate. When her hips met the seat again, she laughed, shaky, triumphant. James dropped to his knees in front of her, forehead resting against her damp knee. I'm sorry, he whispered again. I'm so damn sorry. Margaret threaded her fingers through his hair. We start over, she said, together. The sky darkened to deep violet. Stars began to prick through above the city glow. And on that terrace, wet, cold, alive, doubt had finally begun to crack. The terrace lights had come on automatically, soft, warm LEDs along the perimeter that made the wet flagstone glisten like black glass. The infinity pool reflected the first stars, and a cool evening breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine from the hillside gardens below. Margaret sat in her wheelchair, breathing steady now, color returning to her cheeks despite the lingering chill on her skin. Her hands rested in her lap, no longer clenched in fear, but open, waiting. Lydia wiped her hands on her damp cargo pants and stepped back 3 full paces, enough distance to make the challenge real, but close enough to catch if needed. No more holding, Lydia said. We've built the foundation, now we move it, 1 step. Just 1. From the chair to me. You fall, I catch you, but you won't fall. Margaret looked at the gap between them, maybe 4 feet of open flagstone. It might as well have been a canyon. James stood beside the wheelchair, one hand hovering near Margaret's shoulder. He hadn't spoken much since the upright hold. His face was still streaked from earlier tears, but his eyes were clear, focused. Margaret met Lydia's gaze. You really believe I can do this? Lydia didn't hesitate. I know you can. Your nerves aren't gone. They've been in deep hibernation. Not severed, dormant. Disuse put them to sleep. Years of no demand, no challenge. The cold shocked them awake. The holds reminded them how to fire. Now they need to remember how to walk. 1 command at a time. James's head snapped toward her. Wait, hibernation? Not severed? Lydia nodded once. That's what the old scans missed. Complete injury became the label, and everyone stopped looking deeper. But spinal cords can go into protective shutdown. Neuroplasticity on pause. No signals in, no signals out. The body conserves energy, but it's reversible if you force the system to respond. That's why the hose worked. It wasn't magic. It was demand. James exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for years. All this time, we thought it was gone forever. And it was just asleep? Exactly, Lydia said. And sleep ends when you turn on the lights. Margaret's fingers tightened on the armrests. Then let's wake it all the way up. Lydia extended both hands, palms up. Push off the chair. Right foot first. Small lift, small step. Trust the tremor. It's not weakness. Its power coming online. Margaret looked at James. Stay close, son. He nodded, voice thick. I'm right here. Margaret braced. She pushed. Her torso rose again, higher than before, legs straightening beneath her. The wheelchair rolled back an inch from the force. Her right foot lifted, slow, shaking off the footrest, hovered, then lowered, forward, barely 6 inches. The sole touched flagstone, solid, no buckle. Margaret froze, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe the contact herself. James whispered, Mom. She shifted weight, left foot now, lifted, wobbled, dropped forward another 6 inches. 2 steps, 2 impossible steps. The terrace seemed to hold its breath. Margaret swayed, knees buckling slightly. Lydia lunged forward, hands ready. Margaret caught herself, arms out for balance, then steadied. She stood there, fully upright, weight on her own feet for 3 full seconds. No chair behind her, no support, just her. Then her right knee gave a fraction. She tipped forward. James was there in an instant, arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her into his chest. Lydia caught her from the side, steadying her shoulders. Margaret collapsed into both of them, laughing through sudden tears, body shaking from effort and relief. The 3 of them sank together onto the flagstone, wet, cold, alive. Margaret cradled between her son and the woman who'd refused to let her stay still. James held her tight, forehead pressed to hers. I'm never letting comfort win again, he whispered. No more cages, no more stopping. Whatever it takes, we keep going. Margaret cupped his face. We already are. Lydia sat back on her heels, wiping water from her eyes. Not all of it from the hose. That's the science catching up, she said quietly. UCLA's got papers coming out next year on thermal contrast therapy for chronic spinal injuries. Temperature extremes force neuroplasticity, rewiring dormant circuits. They're calling it hibernation reversal protocol. Your mom just proved it in real time. James looked at Lydia. Really looked. You knew all this when you walked in here. I suspected, Lydia said. I hoped, and I wasn't going to wait for a lab to catch up when someone needed it now. Margaret reached out and squeezed Lydia's hand. Thank you, she said simply, for not giving up on me. Lydia smiled, small, tired, radiant. That's what redemption looks like, she said, 1 step at a time. The stars were brighter now. The city lights twinkled below like scattered promises. And on that terrace, still wet, still cold, a family that had been frozen in time finally began to move forward. The terrace had gone quiet except for the soft drip of the forgotten hose and the distant hum of the city below. The stars were out now, sharp and bright against the velvet LA sky, and the breeze carried a hint of ocean salt up from the Pacific. Margaret stood, really stood, between James and Lydia, her weight balanced on trembling legs that had carried her 3 small, deliberate steps forward. 3 steps. No wheelchair behind her, no arms holding her up. Just her own feet on the flagstone, toes curling against the cool stone, like they were remembering how to grip the earth. She took 1 more, 4th, wobbly but sure, then pitched forward slightly. James and Lydia moved as one, arms wrapping around her, pulling her into the center of a tight, messy group hug. Margaret laughed, bright, breathless, the sound echoing off the glass walls of the mansion. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the last traces of cold water. James buried his face in her damp shoulder, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Lydia held them both, steady as ever, her own eyes glistening. We did it, Margaret whispered into James's hair. We really did it. James pulled back just enough to look at her, eyes red, voice cracked. You did it, Mom. You walked. Margaret cupped his face with both hands, stronger now, no tremble. We all did. Lydia stepped back slightly, giving them space, but Margaret reached out and pulled her back in. You too. Don't you dare stand outside this. They stayed like that for a long minute. 3 people soaked, exhausted, unbreakable, until the laughter faded into soft, shared breaths. James finally straightened, wiping his face with the sleeve of his ruined sweater. He pulled his phone from his pocket, Screen cracked from earlier, but still alive, and opened the browser with shaking fingers. I need to see this, he muttered. All of it. He typed fast. Cold shock therapy, spinal cord hibernation, UCLA. The results loaded instantly. Articles, studies, emerging papers from UCLA's neuro rehab lab, dated just months ago. Thermal contrast protocols, hibernation reversal in chronic injuries, case reports of patients regaining voluntary movement after years of permanent diagnoses. One headline jumped out. Veterans Extreme Cold Protocol inspires underground trials. Could rewrite spinal recovery guidelines. James scrolled, eyes widening. The article featured a photo. A rugged man in his 50s, standing on a beach, prosthetic leg visible but stride confident. Caption, retired Navy SEAL Marcus Reed, paralyzed for 2 years post-training accident, credits extreme cold exposure drills for regaining mobility. His viral recovery story, 2019, quietly influenced several West Coast research teams. James looked up at Lydia. Your uncle, Marcus Reed? Lydia nodded slowly. Yeah, that's him. The video went semi-viral in veteran circles. Millions of views on old YouTube clips. He never wanted fame, just to walk again. But labs started reaching out quietly. Small trials. Off the books at first. I didn't know how far it spread until tonight. James stared at the screen, then at her. You brought that here. To us. Without even telling me you were connected to the inspiration behind half these studies. Lydia shrugged, almost shy. I wasn't trying to be a pioneer. I was trying to pay forward what your foundation gave him. Turns out sometimes the underground stuff becomes the mainstream before anyone notices. Margaret laughed softly. Look at us. 3 ordinary people rewriting medicine on a terrace. James pocketed the phone. Not ordinary. Not anymore. 6 weeks later. Margaret walked the Bel Air gardens, unaided. Slow, careful steps along the winding paths lined with roses and lavender. A lightweight cane rested in her hand, more for confidence than necessity. She paused at the overlook, breathing in the view she'd only seen from a chair for so long. James walked beside her, matching her pace, one hand hovering near her elbow out of habit. Lydia followed a few steps behind, watching with quiet pride. Every weekend now they gathered here. Hose sessions turned training walks. Cold buckets replaced with contrast therapy tubs James had installed in the guest wing. Margaret's progress had been steady. First the terrace, then the hallway, then the full garden loop. James had already wired funding, 7 figures, to Lydia's new nonprofit, Wake Up Labs, a network of community clinics across LA County offering low-cost thermal stimulation programs for paralysis patients, starting with underserved veterans and seniors. Lydia ran the flagship site downtown, training aides, partnering with UCLA researchers who'd finally gone public with their data. She still lived in the guest quarters part-time, family now, not staff. Margaret stopped at the rose arbor, turning to them both. I used to think miracles were big, flashy things, red carpets, big checks, miracle drugs. Turns out they're small, cold water, a stubborn maid, a son who finally listened, and the courage to embrace the hard stuff instead of hiding from it. She looked at James. Don't ever stop challenging yourself, son. Comfort is a beautiful place to visit, but growth doesn't live there. James smiled, real, unguarded. I'm learning, Mom. Promise. Lydia stepped forward, linking arms with Margaret. And don't ever stop believing someone else's story can change yours. The 3 of them stood there, family forged in freezing water and stubborn hope, as the sun set over Los Angeles once more. Miracles don't always announce themselves with thunder. Sometimes they arrive with a garden hose, a determined voice, and the quiet decision to keep trying. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that limits are often just stories we've accepted too long, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment below. What's the cold shock moment that woke something up in your life? Share it. You never know who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay fierce, keep pushing, and remember, it's never too late to walk again.